So we're going to be looking into some of the deployment modes. There are two main ones. Um, we have routed and transparent, or rather, there are only two deployment modes, routed and transparent. Um, Routed is going to turn your firewall pretty much into a router. Transparent is going to turn it pretty much into a switch. So first, let's look at transparent mode. We have these four configuration tasks. This is somewhat in the wrong order because it's not possible to configure in transparent after registering it. So let me fix that real quick. And then let's log in. This is the network. Pretty much we have two clients over here. This is going to work somewhat like a LAN. This is Alpine 2. This is our syslog server. So just for ease of looking, this will be our syslog server. And as you can see here, it's just listening on TCP 1470. And let's just clear the screen so, oops, it's easy to see when we get new syslog messages. Up here, we have the FMC and Firefox. The FMC is going to be our firewall manager. So if I spun up, whether I have 1 or 100 firewalls, I can configure them all from here. And this is going to act as a management PC. Because this is in CML, there's no external access. So we, hold up, let's just put the little blue around there. So we have to have a client inside that can access these GUI things. So first things first, let's log in. And like I said, we're going to start out in transparent mode. So if we just configure firewall transparent, this is the command that will do it. But we get a quick error message. The firewall mode cannot be changed while the manager is configured. Now by default, by default, we have what's called FDM, Firepower Device Manager. That is going to be a GUI on the machine where you just plug in the manage IP and you can manage it from there. Now, for the purposes of this lab and in general, you don't really use that as much. So we're going to be using FMC. So let's just real quick configure managers delete, and this will remove the local manager. Yes. And then we will be able to log in again. Yeah, that's the right. So as we're doing this, like I mentioned, we have local and remote access. I'll quickly open up the FMC. This is the Firewall Management Center. Here we'll have the firewall logged in, and as you can see, there's a bunch of different tabs. Devices is where we're going to be spending most of our time today, but there's all these widgets, all these boxes. Analysis is typically going to contain all your logs. Policies is where you're going to configure stuff like your access control policy. Devices, again, this is where you configure your devices and some of that on-device management. Objects, that's sort of your bread and butter. Everything you configure should be an object. And then integrations is how you link it up with other Cisco products. Now, this should be done. The manager has been deleted. So if I real quickly show managers, again, this should return nothing. And everything's moving a little slow in the command line. And if we show firewall, right now it should show default router. But if we configure firewall transparent, this will change the mode to be a transparent firewall. And obviously, if you're moving an entire device between a router and a firewall, it's not going to be able to maintain its previous interface configurations, right? Because if you have IPs on all your interfaces on a router, you can't do that on a switch. So let's configure manager. And then here we need to say add and then plug in the IP address 192.168.45.10. Over here, I made a little note just saying what all these things are. And then you need to type in a registration key. And the rest of this stuff is if you have multiple firewalls behind NAT, you need to uniquely identify them, right? This isn't the situation now, so that's good enough for us. And this is, again, going to take a little bit to go through. And if I show managers, this will show we have a pending manager. We need to go over to the FMC and we need to register it there. So on both sides. And now just open this up full screen. Adding a device. This is the host, so we need to do 192.168.45.45. This is the display name. I'm just going to call it FTD1. Reg key, this is the same string, so this is just going to be reg key. Group is going to be none. Access control policy. I went ahead and created an ACP real quick, just because that's sort of tangential to what we're doing right now. This is where you put in that NAT ID if that's something that had to be configured. So this is going to take a little bit to log in to everything. Or not log in, but to register and then deploy. Just because, well, everything's a little bit slow right now, but we should be seeing notifications of it being successfully added here soon. These are just because it can't connect to the internet, it's not happy. It should be going. It doesn't look like it is. Let me just check this again to see if the registration status is updated at all. In progress, which is good. So this has made contact, and these two are talking. And here it is. It just took a second to come in. And when we click into here, error loaded native. That's because it's not fully registered yet. I'm being a little hasty. But there are, as we're getting in to here, we should see, let's just quickly go back to the home. We should be able to see all the configuration options. So back to devices, device management. And it's still registering. It's not quite, taking a little bit. So if we look back at our documentation here, when the firewall's in routed mode, each interface by default is going to work as a routed interface. Or that's a bad picture because that's using something we'll get to a little bit later. All right, so transparent, like I said, it's pretty much a switch. So you can add an IP address the same way you can create a switched virtual interface, you can create a bridge virtual interface. And this is going to be layer 2, so it's not going to be a hop. So it shouldn't show up in a trace route. Now, if we go, there are some MAC addresses that are automatically allowed. For example, broadcast max. This helps with ARP and the like. BPDU. This is SDP traffic, if I'm not mistaken. So those are some just basic things that are necessary for it to work as a switch. Let's see. There are some features that are not supported. Obviously, go through read the full documentation to see that. But there's also this article here. These are super helpful. If you see this little TAC emblem or troubleshooting tech notes, if you have a problem and you can find one of these, typically you can go through a pretty good list of troubleshooting steps, and it can tell you exactly what's going wrong at every step. So if you're able to find one of these, it's typically pretty helpful. So we've successfully configured the FTD in transparent mode, and we're working on getting it registered to the FMC. So I've already gone ahead and set up the networking of these clients. And once we demonstrate that and it working like a switch, there are some pitfalls we're going to go through. The FTD needs to send syslog to the syslog server, and this creates a case where it might have another pitfall if we're not careful. Okay, it's still not. Let's just go back out and back in again. I need to just be a little bit more patient. I'm not working with the most system resources in the world, so things are going to be a little bit slow. Okay, so now we can see everything is fully deployed. It has the access control policy myACP. But if we click in, we're going to notice a couple things about the interfaces. First of all, none of these are on. So what I'm going to do is just turn them on and give them names. So this is going to be Alpine 0, enabled. Mode, your options are passive and none. Keep it with none, because if you change it to passive, it's not going to send any traffic, it's just going to listen. The security zone, I made one called switch port. Again, we'll go into zones a little bit later. That's a different exam objective, so I'm going to focus on deployment modes. Now I'm going to go into all of these and give them a logical name, turn them on, and oh, nope, I don't want that. All right. And this last one, we'll just call this CSR uplink. Enable it again. I'm just throwing them all in the same zone so it's easy. Alrighty, so now you need to save your changes and then deploy them. In a lot of troubleshooting scenarios, it's good to go up here and check, are all the devices up to date? Because if they're not, the reason why your configs might not be working, well, it very well might just be that your configs haven't deployed. So it's going to take a little bit to deploy, and while that's happening, we'll go over some other things that are happening, or some other configurations you can make. So name description, I feel like that's pretty obvious. IPv6, you can go through and make all your IPv6 configs. Set your duplex and speed. And then here, if you want to configure a custom MAC address, you can. Otherwise, it's going to automatically generate a MAC address for you. Now down here, if you hit OK, even if you don't do anything, it's going to think you made changes. So typically, I like to cancel out of menus because I'll show that if we go through and we go here, right, still, we're not making any changes, but you cancel and it doesn't think you made any changes. So I recommend doing things that way. And then just more on the device tab, this will give you a general overview of what's going on the device. So again, basic information. Routing, this is where you'd go to configure your OSPF, your OSPF, your BGP, your static routes, your EIGRP, whatever you're trying to do. DHCP, VTEP, similar, pretty self-explanatory. If you want to configure those things, go to those tabs. So now we can see all of our interfaces are up. So let's go and see if Alpine 0 and Alpine 1 can ping each other. So let's clear the screen. Showing the addresses, this is 10.0.1.100. So if I ping 10.0.1.100, obviously that works. If I ping 101, which we can see is this guy, it's not working. Now, why is that? So one thing we can do is, well, since I'm in CML, I could look at this link to see if that's the problem. But since this is a switch, we can look through a variety of things on the command line. But first, one of my favorite places to go is Devices, Packet Tracer, and this will simulate a packet for you to send out. So if we're on FTD1, ICMP, ingress interface, Alpine 0, no VLAN ID, source, this type, echo request, code 0, destination, that we can hit trace. And this will tell us exactly where it's going wrong. So the firewall is dropping this traffic, which isn't great. So we have a destination MAC layer 2 lookup failed. Excuse me. Which indicates we should probably check the MAC address table, right? And what's peculiar is there's nothing in there. So if we go back to this tab, we can look to see if there's any troubleshooting steps that will help us. And we have some captures. This is a pretty specific one. Let's see if we can find a more general one. Well, here's a good one. Capture ARP type raw data, Ethernet type ARP interface inside. So we're gonna have to make a few changes. Let's capture, and then the first thing, we need the word. So let's say ARP tshoot, and then Ethernet type is going to be ARP, because that's what we're looking for. Oh, first, I forgot. We need to specify raw data. Am I mixing up the order on that? Type raw data. That's my bad. Ethernet type is going to be ARP. And then we specify the interface. The interface should be Alpine 0. And then let's say a trace. Or, yeah, let's throw it a trace. So now let's show that capture. Nope. Did I mess this up? So it's not receiving. Capture ARP type raw data Ethernet type ARP interface inside. Show interface Alpine 0. Is this receiving anything? Well, we're getting it's up, line protocol up, so let's capture, let's say ARP2 type raw data, Ethernet type ARP, and then let's say Alpine or interface Alpine 0. And now let's run this capture a little bit. Let's make sure the ping's still going. Let's look at the packet capture on this guy, start it, and stuff is coming through, so we should see some stuff on the FTD. So if we show capture ARP2 is not, why isn't this catching any packets? Let's just capture ARP all type raw data Ethernet type ARP. Is it not sending it ARP requests? No, it is sending ARP requests. I'm seeing them right here. All right, how peculiar. Well, so we're not getting any ARP requests, but if we show interface, show interface Alpine 0 and show interface Alpine 1, we can see it's dropping everything. Let me try one more time to make a capture. Okay, so this should be running. Okay, so that worked. I don't know why the other two didn't. But so we can see that firewall is actually receiving the ARP requests. Sorry for that delay, but it's receiving the ARP requests, but those aren't going in to the MAC address table. So what do we need to do? Well, the reason for this is because if we go to device management, we need to tell the firewall that these interfaces are in fact part of the same bridge group. So when we go in here, we need to add a new type of interface, a bridge group interface. let's just add all three of these so we can talk. On the IP, let's set a 10.0.1.10/24, which puts it just sort of, oh, I forgot to select a bridge group ID. And so now our interface list looks relatively similar, but we now have a BVI. And like always, if we need to deploy the changes, and once this is deployed, we should see that MAC address table populating. So this is going to take a little bit. And if we want to go look at our past deployments, we could go in through here and see what's there and what's been there. So none of these are named, and I've just been doing stuff, so it's not super helpful. But if you do name your deployments, you can go back through. And if we look at this last deploy job, the one where, or let's look at the preview, we can see what was changed. And so here we have Alpine 0 and 1, CSR uplink, switch port. Cool, these are all the, this is everything that was changed. And you can download that as a PDF, and if need be, you can roll back to that deployment. But as we're seeing, this is 75% of the way there. 83, and then the next jump is from 83 to 100. And so what we should see is once this does get deployed, we'll be able to have that MAC address table populated. So let's again try and show the MAC address table and see if anything's going to pop up. We now have a couple things in the table, and we're getting pings flowing through the device, which is good, right? Now it's a switch. Is this, oh, okay. Alpine 0, Alpine 1, they can talk to each other. Cool, if traffic flows through the switch. And we have this MAC address table. So next, I want to configure syslog events. Because like a switch, because this is a switch, right? So it doesn't have any routes. But the problem is, if you want to, a switch doesn't do routing for traffic through the device, or for traffic that just travels through the device. It's correct that you don't have routes, but if we want to generate traffic on the device and send it somewhere, we will need to create a route. So to do that, let's go into here. Let's go into routing. And let's add a new route. Now, I've already gone through and created some objects for this, but the way you would do this is, let's say, create a static route for all 10 networks. As a gateway, I created an object called CSR gateway. Metric route tracking, that's all fine. All right, so now if we hit save, we should be able to have that basically be the default gateway for this network. And then if we go back to device and platform settings, we have this FTD base. I want to assign the current FTD to it. So we'll go in here, add the FTD to the policy, and then save it. And then, of course, we need to go and deploy the changes. So as that's running, I'll walk through a little bit of what happened. So here on syslog, went through and enabled some basic logging. This is what gets logged to the FMC. So kept that relatively low, because if you do too much, it can get overloaded. To configure syslogs, you go into here and you add a new destination. There are a number of options you can pick from. Obviously, syslog servers, event class. Just for the sake of illustration, I did debugging, and that was to show how much, just send logs no matter what, pretty much. And so that creates a destination. And then you need to go down to syslog servers and specify what your server is. Now this is just the IP address of the server, TCP 1470. That's just what that little Alpine box out there is listening on, which makes it, that little Alpine box is listening on 1470, so that's why I set it there. Obviously, you could set it to UDP 514. I didn't do that because I was having some trouble with the built-in syslog server. For some reason, it wasn't working. But once you get through that, but this is a fine alternative. All I needed was something to listen on a port and spit out whatever it heard. So back to the Firefox, the deployment should almost be done by now. Devices are all up to date. And let's see if we have any generate some traffic. And let's see if the Alpine box hears anything. Here, some OSPF, some DHCP. None of these are syslog, unfortunately. So the FTD might not be sending any, which is unfortunate. And we'll have to look into why that is. All right, so here I identified the issue. So if I show ARP and I show my MAC address table, we can see for some reason Alpine 0 thinks it has this IP. Now, how this happened, I have no idea. But if we clear ARP, and now we try ping 10.0.1.1, that works. Let me quickly double check that. I think I assigned the interfaces wrong. Yeah, I did. So let's go in and fix that. That took me an embarrassingly long time to figure out. But let's just quickly name that Alpine and name this CSR uplink. And then I'll quickly walk through some of the stuff that I did that actually worked. So this should be Alpine 0. And this should be Alpine 1. Now if we go to save, we go to routing, and fix the static route so that it's using the right address now. Interface should be CSR uplink. Let's save this, and let's get these changes deployed. So now if we go back to device manager, or I guess I could have clicked on interfaces there. Would have been a better way of doing that. But so gig 00 is CSR uplink, and just verify that it is 00. So let's go back to the terminal real quick and clear it. So what I would do is I would just clear ASP drop ping 10.0.3.1, and so this is going to fail out. It does take a little bit of time to do that though. And then you show ASP drop. And what this will do is it'll tell you why exactly something got dropped. And here we can see no valid adjacency in layer 2. So if you have a layer 2 issue, obviously you have to check your ARP tables and your MAC address tables. And so when I first saw this, that Alpine 0 had that IP, or at least this stuff wasn't matching up perfectly well, I thought somehow Alpine 0 was spoofing, maybe a weird way the pings were flowing through, which is why I made that mistake. If we go back, I think here, we can see the command reference for this. And so this will show all of your ARP entries, and this will show all of the MAC addresses that are connected to this firewall, and the interface name and the MAC address. So that is how I ended up finally figuring that one out. So now my deploy is complete. Let's see, can I now ping 10.0.3.1? Beautiful. Can I ping 10.0.3.2? Can I get all the way there? I can. Is Alpine 2. Beautiful. So now as we can see, there are syslog messages coming through. These are all of them. This is debug level. So we get a lot of information. And that's the basics of transparent mode. I'm going to kill this for a little bit. So now, how do we switch to routed mode? Well, the same way as before, configure firewall routed. Now this won't work because we have a manager configured. So how do we get rid of the manager? So configure manager delete to get rid of the manager, and this again will not work because we need to go in here and go to devices and deregister the device. So here, unregister. Yes. And this will get rid of, because the FMC pushes all the configurations to the FTD, the process we're going through right now is going to completely wipe everything from the firewall. So this is going to take just a little bit. And once it's done, we can go back, we can remove the manager, we can configure it to routed. And like I said earlier, this is going to do a couple things. First, it wipes all the configs from the machine. So we no longer will have our syslog server or that arc table or those misnamed interfaces. We're now going to be completely routed. So everything's going to have its own IP. And we need to go back and go through that. So now if we configure manager delete, it should delete. And if you have multiple managers, you have to type in the IP to specify which manager you're looking to delete. Configure firewall routed. So now we're going to go through. Like I said, it deletes everything. And this should take a little bit, but we're going to successfully change the mode. Now if we configure manager add 192.168.45.10, again, reg key, let's change it up a little bit. So now it's reg key route. This should come back in a second, and we can go back to our FMC, re-register this, and then everything will be fine and dandy. We're going to have to change some of the networking around. So for example, this CSR, let's go into interface G1, let's change the IP address to 10.0.2.1.255, and we'll just make that a /24. This Alpine down here I'll leave for a little bit because we'll come back to it. All right, successfully configured. Whoop. Let's open up this screen again. We got to go back in and re-add the device. Host 192.168.45.45, display name FTD, registration key, reg key route. Let's throw it through the same access control policy, no NAT ID. And so this is going to take a little bit, but now we should have this process being kicked off. So what are the goals for phase 2? Well, switch the deployment mode to routed. That's what we just did, so that should be done. Change the default gateway of each Alpine to the FTD interface. So what I'm going to do is take that 10.0.1.1 and put it on this link right here. And I'm going to make it a /25. So this is going to be .1 and this is going to be .129. Or, no, I'm not going to do that way. This will be a separate /24. I'll just make it .4, 10.0.4.0. And so this is going to be .1, .4, .3, or .2. And .3 is going to be over here. And then again, send that syslog traffic to the syslog server. But this time I want to use OSPF and not static routes. Just to look at something new so it's not boring again. All right. How is our registration looking? It's not quite in yet. So let's go through and do this Alpine box and get some of the networking on. So now this should be on a completely different subnet, get into this FTD. And we can show manager and see that this is in the process of coming back up as a newly managed firewall. This still is pending. I must have messed something up. Let me double check the IP on this guy. Yeah, it's still 4545. And the reason why I did it 4545 is that's just the default on these things. I might have made a typo. Well, that seems successful, but I don't know. Let's check connectivity and registration ID. Yeah, I can't go back and see what exactly I typed in, but I'm assuming I just typed the IP in wrong. We can verify some of this. So on the FTD, there's two sort of route tables. They're sort of separated into like VRFs. So we have data plane, and so when I do ping 10.0.3.1, I guess that won't work because my interfaces all got whites. But that's data plane traffic, right? Where when I'm pinging from Alpine 0 to my CSR, that's data plane. If I want to ping on the management plane, I have to type ping system 10.192.168.45.10. And here we see we get this, and this is sort of a different prompt. And that's because when we go into expert mode, this will take us to this is taking us to the Linux shell. The Linux shell is inside of that. It's inside of that management VRF. And as we can see here, this is our IP, and we just don't have those. Excuse me. We're not seeing that extra stuff. And that's why you wouldn't see, for example, a wrap to the 10.networks in here because this is management plane and that's data plane. But let's check up on this registration process. It's moving along. And we go back here, show managers. And we're going to get back to this. Oh, it's completed. So now we're deploying the access control policy, or at least we should be. All devices are up to date. Will it let me click in here? Yeah, no, it won't. So we still need to wait a little bit. Let's get back to the screen. So I guess I'll take this time as we're waiting to, not that one, this one, sort of explain what phase 3 is. Integrated routing and bridging. Basically, that's this. You turn your firewall into a layer 3 switch, where you can have some interfaces be layer 3, some interfaces be layer 2, and you create what are called bridge groups, and those bridge groups are, if you want an interface to be layer 2, you put it inside a bridge group, otherwise it's going to be routed by default. Now, one weird quirk about bridge groups, if you want to completely isolate a bridge group from the rest of your interfaces, leave it unnamed. Because for a bridge group to be routed, it needs to be named. I don't quite know why that decision was made, but it's what is the case. Um, uh, to route between bridge groups and routed interfaces, you must name the BVI. Yeah, so that's just a sort of design decision. So what we're going to do first is look in here, and we're going to see, I think everything's deployed. All right, so gig 00, as I've so painfully found out, this is our CSR uplink. So let's just keep it like that. We'll enable it. Mode, here the modes are different. Passive and earthspan. Earthspan is your encapsulated remote switchboard analyzer. Again, not something we want to be doing. Here for security zone, let's just create a new security zone and call it outside. All right, and so that's that. It should be up. Oh, I forgot to set an IP address. It's not super useful without an IP address. So static IP 10.0.2. I think I set the other one at 1, so let's just go 10. I know it's not necessarily the most sensible naming scheme in the world, but hey, it's I have plenty of IPs, so if I need to lock it down to not that security zone. The reason I'm defining different security zones here is because pretty soon you're going to see that when you're putting these in a, oh yeah, I got to put a subnet. When you're making a bridge group, you need the devices to sort of be the same. And I'm just going to go through and do this last outline device, security zone, inside IPv4, 10.0.4.1. All right, wonderful. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we need to do routing. As you can see, because this is layer 3, we have a lot more options. I want to do OSPF this time. That's fine. Let's add our zones. So basic process area ID, change that to 0. Available networks, let's add new objects. Let's just call this net 10.0.1. And so let's add another one for this 10.0.2.0. And now we can go through and add them both to our OSPF area. So that's no authentication, default cost, backbone area. All right. So let's save this. and then let's deploy it. So once this deploys, hopefully we'll be able to see, um, you also could configure it by interface. And I'm hoping this works right the first time. I thought the transparent stuff would work right the first time, and it just didn't. But so as we're waiting, I'll show a little bit of this. Show run. So as you can see, we're going to have very similar stuff here, where we have this .2 network and this .3 network are both going to be advertised over OSPF. So the goal is to form an adjacency here. And I understand this one doesn't have a route, but I don't really care, because it's not super useful that thing needs to be able to talk over the network as well. The deployment's almost done here, and then we should be able to see all of this information. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to go to the FTD. I'm going to show that hopefully this stuff is working. Then I'm going to go through and ping to make sure the Alpine boxes can ping their default gateway, and just run some ping tests. And then, I mean, it's a router. I can show that you can't ping across stuff that doesn't have routes, but I feel like everyone knows what a router is at this point. So this should be all deployed. So if we now show interface, hello? Nope, not BVI. IP brief. We can see we now have our connection here, and we should be able to ping 10.0.2.1, and this should go to the directly connected, so ping 10.1 or 0.1.100. Beautiful. Ping 10.0.1.1, this should get to the firewall, and it does. And if I go to try and ping 2.1, this will get to that router, but if I go to 3.2 all the way across, oh, it is pinging. So that probably means OSPF worked. And here we can see our OSPF routes are working. And if we go here and show route, we have our OSPF routes loaded in. So that's routed mode that worked fairly well. Alpine 1, it's going to work hopefully as expected, where we can ping the default gateway, because this one doesn't have a route. We can't ping past that. So let's address that issue, but not by creating a route, by adding these to a bridge group. So if we go to device management, interfaces, add interface. As you can see here, we have more options. First, create a bridge group interface. This is 0 and 1, or I guess 1 and 2 rather. Let's call this LAN BVI. Bridge group ID of 1, IPv4, 10.0.1.10. Let's just keep it what it was previously. So when you move interfaces around, you delete pretty much everything. So those two things are going to be deleted. Okay. What I need to do first is go through and wipe the IPs off these, or wipe the IP off this one. I don't know why I can't do that on its own, but it doesn't want to. So let's just go through and get this LAN BVI. I'm going through redo what I just did. 10.0.1.10. Okay. Yes, I want to continue. As far as I'm aware, this integrated routing and bridging is not a common thing. Excuse me. Why does that say disabled? Oh, that's path monitoring. The interface should be enabled. At least both are enabled individually. So let's deploy this change real quick. And also, I can't type. 10.0.1.11. Let's just move it back to alright. And if we go here, we should see something about the default gateway. So in transparent mode, you're not supposed to use it as the default gateway because, again, it's a switch. But it doesn't explicitly say that we should in routed, but that's how things work. So it's at 83 again, so we're almost to this being deployed, and we can see this integrated routing and bridging, where, keep in mind, the only reason this will be able to interact with the CSR router is because it's named. If it was not named, you would not be able to, you would completely isolate your bridge group from the rest of your interfaces. So that's something to keep in mind. That can be an easy pitfall. But other than that, we should have the networking down here. We can go and reconfigure syslog. I don't see an incredible point because if we go here and ping 10.0.3.2, it should get there, and it does. So I don't think it's imperative to reconfigure syslog. But let's check up on where we are, and it looks like once this is deployed, we'll be done with. Why'd that fail? Okay, so, whoops. This is being annoying. I'm just going to change the network completely. It doesn't like, what it wants me to do is stage deployments to remove the IP first and then go through and do the BVI, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to change the IP address to be in a different network. And so it will be happy with me now. There are some things I'll have to change. Specifically the routes. So if I go to routing, I'll have to create a new network object and advertise. Obviously, if I did this via the interface-based configuration, let's just delete that, add a new network. Like I said earlier, objects are sort of the bread and butter of a firewall, so everything has to be one. And after this deploy, we got to go change the networking of the Alpine clients, and then we should be done. It's been a somewhat prolonged one. Hopefully the future videos will go a little smoother. But I'm going to leave things relatively raw, relatively. I'm going to leave in all my mistakes for multiple reasons. On one hand, I don't want to do an incredible amount of editing, so it's just easier. And on the other hand, I don't know. I think troubleshooting is important, and it's something that can help you learn. So sudo setup interfaces. Forgot the command for a second. 10.0.100.100. So there's one. Oh. Should have done a DHCP server. Might have been easier. There we go. And what's the status of this deployment? We're at 83, 90, and it should jump to 100 next after this Lena configuration is applied. Hopefully we don't have another deployment fail, but you know, it's how things go sometimes. I forget how to find the historic deploys. Yep, here we are. And you can go through and click and see everything. And if you want to roll back, of course, you can do that as well. That's still in progress, 90%. It'll be 100% here soon enough. And this is still a neighbor because none of the configs on this link have changed. It's only been the LAN stuff. What? Why does it say ready for deployment? That's not right. Did the previous one fail again? Why'd it fail this time? Oh, OSPF isn't supported on BVI interfaces, so I need to do static routes. So I'll go through and do that. So it can be real helpful if you go and read the documentation. It does say this in there. I forgot, wasn't paying attention, and so that's just my bad. OSPF. And I need to go in and delete this network. All right, so while those deployments are going, there should be a unsupported features for bridge groups in routed mode. We should see here dynamic routing protocols. They need static routes. So that means on the CSR, I need to configure a route. Is it 4.1 or 2.10? Did I? There we go. So now if I show IP route, the only OSPF we have still is a network that doesn't exist anymore, which is super helpful. I love it when I have routes that don't take me anywhere. Are we at 83? We are. Like every time I check back, it's in at 83. But so yeah, reading through the documentation, if you're studying for an exam, what can be helpful, I've found, is just downloading the documentation, plugging it into AI and asking it to quiz you on it if you want to learn all the facts on it. When I was taking the SNCF, that's what I had to do because some of the questions are just so specific. TCMP specialties are a little evil. They're a little mean. They're not nice. But we have this completed. If we show our interfaces again, we should see our BVI. We should be able to go back here, see pinging the other device, pinging across this network, 10.0.2.1. We should be able to get there. We can't. That's beautiful. Because we need a static route. I forgot to add that static route on the firepower side. Static route. Let's just say interface and BVI. Let's just set this as a default gateway. So now, hopefully, one final deployment, and then everything will be a-okay, and the lab will be done. Yeah, this was very messy, but I think it does sort of illustrate the point. This section over here is our bridge side, and it's separated on the route side. So yeah, just as this deploys, is that at 83? Oh, it's at 8. Not great. But yeah, so as this finishes deploying, I'll get my ping across the network, and then I'll be happy. Another thing that's important, like I mentioned, the management network is sort of on a separate VRF. So if I show route, it's showing connected networks and local networks and OSPF networks, but it's not showing the management. So you can't create a route for this guy to get to the management network because it's separated, segmented. I saw the routing, so I wondered if maybe I could ping before the deploy actually finished, but it doesn't look like I can. But, oh, the deploy's done? How peculiar. That's not fun. Is it? So what's the problem? Let's start a packet capture here. Clear it. So we have OSPF. That's not really what I want to see. Our pings aren't getting across. But they're getting here at least, right? Why am I not seeing any pings? Oh, is my default gateway not working? Was I wrong? So it's not even able to ARP resolve. But what if I ping 10.0.100.1? Or that doesn't exist. Wait a minute, why did I set it to .10? Oh, I don't know why I did that. But if I sudo service or sudo setup interfaces eth0, that guy's the same. That's the same. Right now, can I ping? Well, what's going on? Is it dropping the ping for some reason? It shouldn't be, but it's not responding to it. Well, can I ping through it? Is it a firewall issue? Okay, so I can ping through it. So my platform settings are just preventing me from. So I can ping all the way across the network, but I can't ping the firewall. That's because my platform settings are preventing me from doing so. That's something I was messing around with that a while ago, trying to troubleshoot, but that wasn't correct. So that is the basics of deployment modes, routed transparent. Basically, do you want to route or do you want to switch? And then you can do integrated routing and bridging if you can't decide and you want both.